In this video, we're going to learn how to build an assignment inside of Blackboard. So some instructors may wish to use the assignments tool in Blackboard to keep students engaged and continually within the Blackboard environment. And so we're going to learn how to use that tool, and also in some future videos how to use the Blackboard gradebook to grade those assignments and give feedback. Let's start with just setting up an assignment. So you can say I'm in a course where I'm a teacher and I have edit mode turned on. Now we're used to coming to the build content area where we often will use an item or a content folder. But if we slide over one area, we'll be in the assessments area. And the two main assessments that you'll use are either a test or an assignment. So let's learn how to build an assignment. I'm going to select the assignment, and this is going to all look and feel an awful lot like anything that we've built before within Blackboard, with a few different options that we'll want to be aware of. So we'll get into this in just a moment, but obviously your assignment name goes here. Your description and box provided here can include things like text, videos, images, links. Anything you normally would put inside a Blackboard can be placed in here. So all of that works functionally the same. Now you may wish to attach files, especially if you're going to, in the example that I'll show you in just a few moments, have students reading text or a template that you want them to turn in. So you can attach files that students can use, edit, mock up. Due dates can be very important. So if you have a due date for that particular assignment, you would include that here. Points possible. How much is your particular assignment going to be worth? So as we get into the Blackboard gradebook, which is not at this time, as of the spring of 2021, connected to the Infinite Campus gradebook, but as we're using Blackboard for the assignments tool, Blackboard has its own gradebook. It's called the Grade Center. It's right here. You can do your grading and feedback, and then anything that you'd want to communicate to families or students as part of the actual grade, you would include in the Infinite Campus gradebook by transferring over that information. One of the really nice features is the ability to grade to a rubric. So I've already created a rubric, but here you can create a new rubric for your particular grading needs. If you want to see what the creating a new rubric looks like, that takes us into a new window. We can name and describe our rubric here. And then we can do things like change our rubric to a points base. We can add an additional column. We can change this to our standard grading. We can assign the grades, change the row that we're looking at here by editing its name. So what target are you looking at? Provide a description here. Remove additional rows if you don't need that many. All right, and once you have that all set, submit it, and you will have a reusable rubric that you can use. Let's go through a few other things that you might want to set. Submission details. Most of the time, you'll want to do an individual submission. In fact, it's pretty rare that I can think of times when you do a group or portfolio submission, although there may be uses for that. Let's talk about the number of attempts. How many attempts that you give your students is up to you. Single attempts will only let the student submit work one time, which means that if they have any challenges or issues, they submit the wrong work, they'll have to come to you for you to give them a new attempt at it. So I generally recommend multiple attempts, and then you can determine how many times would be appropriate for your students. For my students, it might be 3. You can also provide an unlimited attempts option, which means they can just keep trying until they get it right. The last graded attempt, this is what grades will go into the grade book. So for instance, you can grade multiple attempts. I would always suggest we give them the highest grade, but that's up to you. So whatever the highest grade out of those 3 attempts is that they earn. It doesn't mean they have to attempt 3 times, but if they do, whatever one's the highest is what's going to go in the grade book. Let's talk about the plagiarism tools. So Blackboard does come with its own plagiarism tool set called Safe Assign. And when certain types of file formats, such as a PDF, are submitted to it, it does do some level of plagiarism checking. Now, we have not been thrilled with the level of plagiarism checking that Safe Assign is doing at this particular time, but it's certainly something you can use if you're interested in it. We just want you to know that ultimately Safe Assign is probably not the best plagiarism checking tool that's out there, and so we don't want to give you a false sense of hope that it'll catch all plagiarism. But if you choose to use the plagiarism tool, you can check that on and allow students to view that Safe Assign originality report. So when they get something from a website, a hit that says that they perhaps plagiarized their work, they can see that. Within the grading options, one nice one that you might be interested is the anonymous grading. So if you want to just give students feedback and not be colored at all by who the student is, anonymous grading is a way for you to grade the work, not necessarily the student who submitted the work, and then that'll associate the student and the grade together after the fact. Delegated grading is not something that we would use in the K-12 environment. And then we can go into the display of grades. So I would generally leave this set just the way that it is, but this does kind of give you options about what kinds of things might go into a calculated score. So for instance, if this is just formative and I don't want it to be part of a grade center grading calculation, I can turn it off. For most of us, though, this doesn't matter because it's not connected to our Infinite Campus gradebook at all. So we can just leave it as is. And then finally, we get into the last section, the availability. So making the assignment available tells us that it's available live for students now, or we can turn this off and just preset it and tell the date that it's available and turn it back on. And then track number of views. There is a report available to show you how many times students have viewed the assignment, if that's something of interest to you. This is within Blackboard, and it's a unique report that you can run as a teacher in Blackboard. So that is the general setup. I'm going to go over to an assignment that I've got pre-created here, just so you can see now that I've got that ready to go. So the assignment is, will AI take over finding evidence? And here, this one's just going to be pretty text heavy. It gives some very specific directions to the student. So things that are worth noting. Using notability marking tools, I'd like you to go and get the PDF that I'm attaching. I'd like you to answer this particular question on that PDF. Tells them how I'd like them to work in Notability and how to send that back. Submit your Notability document as a PDF to this assignment when completed. So it gives them the directions that I want them to have. I'm going to browse my computer and attach this PDF that I found from the web. So here you can see it's attached. I'm not going to set any due dates for this particular one, but I am going to show you that I did add a rubric. So I went and selected my rubric. The one that I selected is no longer in my list here, but I selected that and picked it. So finding evidence from text is my rubric that I'm going to use for grading. This is an individual submission. I'm going to change this over to students having, in this case, 2 attempts, and I want them to get the highest score of the 2 if it's needed. I won't be using the plagiarism checker. And everything else is pretty much set to go. So now I'm going to click the Submit button. And just so you can see what that looks like in context, so here's some items. Here's what the students are learning from. Here's their reflection activity. And this is what they're going to do, their application part of the learning that we've done today. So you can see this is currently what the assignments icon looks like in Blackboard. In the next video, I'll show you how students would actually complete the assignment.